Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and this week we are talking about burnout. Burnout is one of those words we hear all the time, but what does it actually mean? The reason why I am doing this episode is because I found myself saying those words within a life coaching session. I was talking to my life coach and saying, I just wake up and I'm tired and I'm exhausted. Obviously, I've not had the easiest year, and it's been a lot of energy to even just pretend I'm okay. Where I'm quite an authentic person, I never really walk through the world with this mask on of trying to be professional. I don't exactly work in the most professional job anyway, where I can be quite creative, I can be myself. So I've never really had to walk into a work environment and pretend to be anything that I'm not. And I think where I've had some difficult moments this year, I have had to put a mask on and pretend I'm fine when I'm not. And that consumes a lot of energy. So basic things like leaving the house is a little bit harder, or basic things like holding a small talk conversation at some networking event is harder because all the things I want to talk about are quite miserable and boring right now. And I think taking up that much more energy does lead to you being more burnt out. And so I walked into this life coaching session. I was like, I'm just exhausted. I'm burnt out. And she hit me with some cold, hard truths. She was like, you're not burnt out. You're overscheduling yourself. So if you listened to the episode a few weeks ago where I talked about how lonely I was feeling and that I needed to make an active effort to busy my weekends, I did that. And now all my weekends are packed, which means my work weeks are packed. And not just my work weeks, I also have events in the evenings. So it's like my work days are full, my work evenings are then packed with events. And then the weekends where I used to sit on the sofa and do nothing are now gone. And I've been going out, I've been going to Wales, I went to Bristol, I've been all over the place. Work hard, play hard. And as a result, no rest, no relaxation. And essentially what she said was, you're an introvert and you need to factor that into your schedule. And actually, within that session, she forced me to put 2 days off in my diary during the work week. And even then, when I put that in, I was like, I don't have time for that. But this is the problem with burnout. You always think you don't have time to rest until you actually are having a breakdown. Then you force yourself to take a break. So I moved a few things around. I put 2 days off in my diary, and it still had to have an exception. I still had to go to an event on that Monday evening. It was a Monday and Tuesday. And on that Monday evening, I still had to go to an event. And during the day, I might have still replied to all my emails and texts because they don't stop. And I didn't want Wednesday to be a nightmare day. But it was enough to just have a little bit more energy. And it was enough where I didn't work, but I was in bed most of the day. And it was just a moment to take a break. And I think this is where we talk about the word burnout more often now because there has been a change in the way we work. And I think it had already happened before the pandemic with the introduction of phones, which the moment we had emails on our phones, or the moment we were able to be accessible to our bosses, our colleagues at all hours of the day, that already changed our dynamic in the working world. Because when you left work, when you left the office, you left work at the office. So having a phone changed that. Then the pandemic changed that because we worked from home. So we lost the boundary of an office and home. This wasn't the case for some people like me. I always worked from home. So in that sense, it was a more gentle adjustment. But I also think as a society, we glorify being busy. How many times have you gone to a party and you've gone, how are you? And someone replies, busy. Busy is not how you are. Busy is like your diary. That's your schedule. But it's almost like this badge of honor we wear because we live in a society that glorifies being productive all the time. And as a result, we feel the need to be more productive in order to earn our rest, in order to earn our relaxation. And that's when we're on a fast road to burnout. I think the first time I properly burnt out was in 2022. I did 2 books back to back. The timing of how it worked was just very strange. And I had pitched 2 books at the same time. But the nature of children's publishing is it takes a lot longer for the deal to come in. And I hadn't even meant to pitch 2 books at the same time. Basically, a publisher had approached me just as I pitched another book. And long story short, what ended up happening was I wrote an entire 100,000 word book, and within a week, I had to start my next book. And that is so not how my schedule worked when it comes to publishing, but I was so excited, desperate, interested in writing a children's book. I just didn't want to say no. So I did it back to back, and I don't think I realized the impact of it until I got to the end of writing that children's book and having a year where I wrote 2 books in 1 year. And then also the fact that during that year I got COVID 4 times. In total, I've had COVID 6 times. So I don't know what's going wrong with my immune system. That kind of kicked me into long COVID. And I don't think trying to write 2 books while being exhausted helped, because I think one of the things about burnout is you only really get to that point if your body is telling you to stop. You are sensing that you are being more and more drained and you are exhausted and you're not listening to it. And you might have heard me say before, if you don't listen to your body when it whispers, it will scream. And my body screamed. And that's when I was like, no, we can't write a book for a while. It's why I took all of 2023 off writing, not only because I had to release both those books, and releasing books is just as much effort, if not more effort, than writing the book itself. Because you have to deal with like the public. At least when you're writing your book, it's you and your laptop and your words, and no one bothers you, no one sends you an email, no one asks you to do anything, and you can just manage your own time and be largely at home in my pajamas, frankly. It's when you're releasing the book that you have to be public facing and doing all the interviews and talking about it over and over again. And that also consumes a lot of energy. So I think for me, the warning signs that burnout is coming or that I'm getting exhausted is when I have exciting things in my diary and yet I'm not getting excited. Or when I'm waking up on a Monday and I'm already looking forward to a Friday. And I understand I'm very privileged in terms of my job. I love my job. So for me, it's very rare to wake up on a Monday and already dread the week ahead. But I think it's important to recognize when there's a change in your attitude towards your job. And there is something when it comes to burnout that it's around apathy, that suddenly nothing really matters. You don't have enough energy to care about the things you used to care about. You don't have energy to get excited for the things you used to get excited around. And when you're at that point, you do actually have to look at your life in general. And it has to be more than, okay, let's just take a day off. Where I was overscheduling myself, taking a day off will help. But if you're actually going through burnout, it's looking at your lifestyle and looking at, okay, this needs to actually be a lifestyle change because something I am doing is not working. And so when I'd hit that point around my 2 books, as I said, I took a year off from writing just so I could release those 2 books, but also so that the creativity can come back. Because when you are burnt out, there is no time for creativity. If you think about it, that your body will always put energy towards your needs before your wants. And creativity is a want, whereas a need is like having enough sleep, making sure you've eaten enough, all of those things. So if your body is in survival mode and just trying to keep you alive, there's going to be no energy left for creativity or the extra stuff. I think some of the key things that I put in place were better boundaries with my phone, which that's always a slippery slope. I get better at it and I get worse at it. But there were things I did, like removing notifications off my phone. I still have no notifications on all social media apps. I don't actually have the social media apps on my phone either. If you have an iPhone, you can have it in the app library without having it on your home screen, because I found by having it on my home screen, and the same way with notifications, those notifications actually prompt you when you're not thinking about it. And if you are on social media as much as me, you're already thinking about it. You're already going to have to click on it because you want to post something, because you want to put a story up, because you need to reply to that comment, because you need to find the address for the event you're going to. There's enough reasons why I click on the app that I don't largely miss anything. There's never something important or urgent that comes into my social media. Same with my emails. I don't have any notifications on my emails. 90% of the time now when I check my emails, it's on a laptop because I want to be able to close that laptop. So yes, I can go into my emails. The email app is actually on my phone, but it won't show me when I get a new email. It won't vibrate. It used to vibrate every time I got a new email. The only thing that has notifications on my phone now is WhatsApp. And I do a lot of work on WhatsApp now, but I feel like that is the only place, bar calling me, that something urgent will come in, something I actually need to see. And to be honest, I was on my phone all hours of the day anyway. If you've ever DM'd me on Instagram, you'll be shocked to know that I don't have notifications on there because I'm on there so much that even my delay in response by not having notifications is not really a delay because I'm always on my phone. And I think this is where we have to reduce the ability to access you all the time. And as much as we can't control that, it's one of those things that has to be in work in progress, because if you don't consider it, it's not going to happen. Like, those boundaries aren't going to automatically appear by you continuing to do what you've always done. So in terms of doing different things, there are many things you can do, but I also think the other element of it is understanding the difference between rest and play. So when you are so exhausted, it's very easy to opt for what I had been opting for, which is spending an entire weekend doing nothing, not seeing people, especially if you're an introvert. I just want to define introvert because I think everyone has slightly different definitions. How I work with the words extrovert and introvert and what I believe is the true definition of it before it got blurred by pop psychology is introvert and extrovert is not how sociable or outgoing someone is. So if you looked at how chatty and bubbly I am, you probably would assume I'm an extrovert. I'm an introvert because the question you have to ask yourself to figure out whether you're an introvert or extrovert is, when you are completely exhausted, how do you gain energy? Do you need to be around people or do you need to be alone? And because when I am truly exhausted, I need to be alone, I'm an introvert. And as a result, I do need time alone. But it's not just rest. It also has to be play. And this is where it is something that is very natural when you are a child, of being able to go outside. I mean, every day in school, you have break time where you go and play for an hour. As adults, we don't make a lot of time for play. And this is where this abrupt shift from spending weekends in alone to then going out every weekend. I noticed so many times that actually going out gave me energy. I would end up being more exhausted the next day because of the introvert part of myself. But if you are making no time for play, if you can't remember the last time you did something fun, even if it's going to the theatre, maybe your thing is playing Xbox, whatever it is, making time for something that isn't work. Especially within creative jobs, there's also something quite tempting of like turning every single thing you like to do into a job. Like, I analyze TV shows for TikTok now. I used to love reading, but reading is now associated to being an author. I really had to like push the boat out and try to find something that I had not turned into an element of my job. And that's where painting came in. I'm an awful painter. But as you've probably heard me say before, it's really important to get a hobby you're shit at, which you're not trying to improve at, because when I get good at something, I then incorporate it into my job. So painting, paddleboarding, all these things are my fun. I also do love a good night out once in a while, although I found that's less and less as I've got a little bit older. But when you are completely exhausted and burnt out, don't just consider relaxation or rest. Also consider that play is a really important component as well.
Hi, Michelle. One of the pieces of advice that I've often heard around burnout is making sure that you take as much time as you need to stay home, recover mentally and physically. However, I'm kind of finding that this is making me a bit scared to go back into the outside world, and suddenly it actually becomes very comfortable being at home and cancelling all your plans. And I don't know whether this is burnout, kind of still needing to recover. I wonder if you have any advice about getting that balance right, about kind of still being present in life, but also giving your body and mind the chance it needs to recover.
I totally hear that. So there are weekends where it's just been really tempting to not leave the house. And I think it could be a number of factors. I was talking to a friend last night who said just the political stuff that's going on in the world at the moment, it's depressing. And so staying in is safety, is certainty, versus leaving the house is scary, is unknown. And I understand the pressure or the desire or the need to stay sociable or interacting with the world. But I think this is where, for me, I found technology is an amazing thing. I can be sociable while still being in because I FaceTime my friends. I FaceTime a lot of my friends for hours. And there are a number of friends who are, even if I don't FaceTime, I voice note. So I don't feel like I'm completely disconnected to the world. With this, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. I would need a lot more context to know what specifically you are going through. But I think sit in it, feel the fear and notice, what is the fear telling you? What is it about going out that scares you? What is it about staying in that brings you comfort? Where is the line of balance for you? Try it one way where you go further into the comfort, you stay home more than you ever did. But what I don't want you to be doing is staying home and then feeling guilty or worrying about not socializing enough, because then either way, you're not benefiting from it. So it's really important. One of the things I talk about is, if you're going to rest, 100% rest. If you're going to work, 100% work. Stop doing this middle ground of both. And I think this is where the lines get really blurred, where you're doing your emails, but the TV's on. Is that work or rest? You can't find that line. And I think that's where you're not resting because you're not really enjoying that TV show because you're doing your emails at the same time. But also, yes, sending emails can be a really mindless task, but you do need the ability to concentrate. So actually being able to find a separate line, but also if you are resting and then making yourself feel guilty why you aren't doing something else, you actually aren't getting the benefits of either. And so that's why I talk about this like 100% or 100%, not this middle ground. If you've made the decision to stay in and not go out, and you are spending the time being guilty, there will be no energy being replenished because your energy is going on the fact that you feel guilty. We have to unlearn this association with guilt. So it's really important we learn when guilt is inappropriate and appropriate. So appropriate guilt is when you've done something wrong. That's why guilt exists. There are no bad emotions, and all our emotions teach us something. Guilt teaches us when we have not lived according to our conscience. So when we do something bad to someone, when we do something wrong, when we make a mistake, for lack of a better term, that's when we should feel guilt. Staying home on a Saturday night is not something you should feel guilty about. And I think, again, it's being trained from childhood. How many times when you were sitting on the sofa and watching TV as a child were you told to go do something more productive, to go do your homework and all of that? You'd already come home from school where you were having what's an average school day? That's 6 hours. You've had maybe an hour break in the middle of that. You're allowed to come home from school and have an hour's break. But because there was so much stigma around TV, how many adults rest now by watching TV? So anytime a child was stagnant or still, they were told that they were doing nothing, they needed to do something more productive. That's when we first learn the message that actually it's not okay to rest. And there are some really great books on this. There's one called Laziness Does Not Exist. And it's about how we all beat ourselves up so much around the fact we're lazy. But laziness, there's such a high bar for laziness that actually laziness is usually just like a 10% quieter day than your average day. And so giving yourself the permission to rest fully. But then also, when you've made the decision to go out and be sociable, be present in that. If you are finding you're going out and socializing with your friends and then in the back of your mind, you're thinking about a TV show you want to watch, or you're counting down the minutes until it's acceptable to leave, or you're wondering whether you can leave the party without saying bye to everyone, that's probably the indication that you do need more home time. You do need more alone time. And I think this is where you've got to experiment with it. That try one thing, see whether it works, see whether it makes you feel better. One of the things I've started thinking about is the fact that I'm so comfortable at home is largely because for a large portion of my life, I have not found comfort in my living situation. I've either been living with housemates that I wasn't getting on with, or my childhood was quite turbulent because I went to a boarding school, and that's sharing a dorm with like 8, 9 people, which are never people that you choose or want to be around. So when I found that I was living with a housemate I loved, I did have that natural desire to want to be home more. And then when I lived alone, that was even more so. But I fully understand this thing of you don't want to isolate yourself from the world. And so sometimes it takes that required effort to push yourself out there, try to actually engage with the world and see whether it brings more energy. You won't know until you try it. And sometimes it's just dipping your toe in. Thank you so much for your question, and I hope that helps. Okay, so some boundaries I want you to be thinking about. I want you to be thinking about boundaries with your phone. I want you to be thinking about boundaries with whether it's taking your work phone out less or getting a work phone. I don't have a work phone, and I actually think I'm getting to the point where I might want to do that. It's also setting more boundaries around who can contact you when, and also start using airplane mode. That is one of my favorite things. Putting your phone in your bag when you're socializing is another really big thing that I do. And also getting out into nature. That sounds very woo-woo, but it's true. Getting into water, the classic tree hugging, touching grass, all of that can make a really positive impact. And also getting time away from screens, because I think we all stare at screens too much. My screen time is horrific. There have been days when my screen time is 12 hours. And I think if we are able to create more time where we aren't looking at our devices and actually being present in the world, it can help with burnout. But ultimately, it's not all of these small changes. It has to be a fundamental lifestyle change. And I do believe we're getting to the point societally where we're going to have a bigger conversation around workplace boundaries, around annual leave. That's another thing. Make sure you take your annual leave. It is shocking, the statistics out there on how many people are never taking their annual leave. And so it's also about, I think fundamentally where it stems from is making sure the pie of life is complete. And what I mean by that is there are different sections in life. There's work, there's social life, there's health and fitness, there's family, there's friends. Making sure all of your self-esteem and also all of your happiness and joy isn't just coming from the workplace is a way you can create a much more balanced life. So if you're currently going through burnout, I think this time of year, we're all primed for it. We've had a long year. Every year we get to like that November, December. And I feel like this year it started a little bit earlier because everyone's almost prepping for December. So November's been even more chaotic. Honestly, my November's currently busier than my December because I think everyone's been so busy prepping for December that my November has just been non-stop. And so I think give yourself a little bit of grace, give yourself the permission to rest, and look at your lifestyle overall and see how that can change. So as you know, we end every episode with something I am learning right now. And something I'm learning right now is something really strange that's happened to me this week. I have bumped into 2 childhood friends of ex-best friends of mine, which is really weird. It was two days back to back. And in both those circumstances, those childhood friends of my ex-best friends were telling me about some issues they were having with their ex-best friends. These are people I do not know. These are people I bumped into in the street randomly. And in them telling me that they were having the same issues that I was having with these people years ago, it made me realize how much I'd grown and how much I'd changed. I think I had a habit of having really codependent friendships. And having these conversations, the thing I'm learning is that whilst I am probably too dependent at the moment, I'm very hyper independent at the moment. I've realized how I'm not as codependent in my friendships. And it's a great thing to be able to look back and realize that you are better, you are different. And I don't generally like looking back, but I think that is the one time you probably should and be like, oh, actually, I'm glad I made that decision to end that friendship, because 5 years on, you were all still going through the same things. And we made very different decisions at the time. I chose to not be in the friendship and they chose to stay and try to figure it out. Ultimately, 5 years in, if you're still having the same problems I was having 5 years ago, then it kind of confirmed I made the right decision. And I think being able to look back and see how much I've grown is an important thing. And I don't know if you've taken a moment to look back and see how much you've grown. So if you haven't, this is a suggestion that now would be a good time to look back at your friendships, your work life, your family life, your friends, your love life, and just notice all the ways that you have improved and made different decisions. I think there was a really illuminating point at one point where one of these people was telling me about how she was talking about a trip we'd gone to Cornwall, and she was talking about how her friend had made all these passive-aggressive comments. And I was like, I never noticed that. And I was on that trip. I was in that car and she was saying she had said all these mean things about her education. It was a moment where I was like, why wouldn't I have noticed that? And I think I must have just been so wrapped up in the friendship, I didn't notice how mean some of those comments were. Or it was so normalized in my life back then to have people who spoke like that, who made these passive-aggressive jabs, these jokes that weren't really funny. And now it would be really jarring. Now I would notice it. But when I was 20, I didn't. And I was able also to take a moment and be like, it wasn't me who said it, it was her home friend. But I was able to take a moment and be like, I'm really sorry, that's a really rubbish thing to say. And I don't believe that, and I'm sorry that was said to you. And I think it's recognizing that actually sometimes you don't notice things in the moment, but you can always notice them in hindsight. And that's what growth is. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave us a review. Make sure to follow and hit subscribe, because we release an episode every Tuesday. Have a lovely day.